right. Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Vanishing Hour podcast. Tonight, I got a good one for you. But before we dive in, let me just insert a few shameless plugs in here, real quick. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free to head over to the socials I've created on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, if you feel like further showing your support, I have shamelessly created a Patreon page. Tons of bonus crap on there, and I plan on tons more. Any support is always appreciated but never required. Now, with that, let's dig into the Vanishing of Hannah Upp. Now, I just wanted to insert this in here because I have since gone back and edited. I'm really sorry for how punchy this recording is. I am still getting used to my new microphone setup. So it's a little rough, but I apologize. I promise the future podcasts will be much better. Now, I wrote this instead of typing it for some reason, so forgive me if you can hear like papers ruffling and shit. I'll try to edit that out the best that I can. I don't know what I was thinking. But our story starts on September 16th, 2008, and in New York City. It's midday in Staten Island, and the ferry is making its way through the water when the captain spots what appears to be a head just floating by near Robin's Reef. They are immediately like, holy shit. And they launched their rescue boat and went to investigate. When they approach, they realize it's a whole ass woman dressed in running shorts and a sports bra just floating face down. The deckhands in the rescue boat are thinking she has to be dead, but they hoist the body by the ankles and shoulders and pull her onto the boat. They're suddenly met with a giant gasp of air from the woman, who immediately begins crying hysterically. Authorities are called and the woman is whisked off to Richmond University Medical Center in Staten Island. Now, I said this is where our story begins, but it actually starts a little further back. So let's just rewind a little bit. It's August 28th, 2008, which also happens to be my birthday. 23-year-old Hannah Upp is getting ready to start her second year of teaching Spanish to middle schoolers at Thurgood Marshall Academy. She lives in New York City with her roommate and close friend Manuel. I'm going to say Manuel. Manuel knocks on Hannah's door that morning and wishes her a great first day back and just makes sure she's up and at it. Hannah responds back and wishes Manuel a great day as well. With that, he leaves and Hannah decides to go for a run before heading to her teaching job. She throws on a pair of running shorts and a sports bra and takes off from the apartment. At some point later that day, Manuel comes home. He checks in on Hannah, only she's not there. However, oddly enough, her wallet, cash, credit cards, and purse are still just chilling in her room. Manuel is totally put off by this and feels like something is immediately off and not right, so he calls police. The police immediately kick it into gear and begin digging. They find out that Hannah did not make it to her first day back at the school that she taught at. They seal off her room for evidence and begin a full-on investigation, almost treating it like a preemptive homicide, and in their words, leaving no stone unturned. The media grabs hold of this case and it just blows up. There's flyers everywhere, front page headlines, 6 o'clock news. Her family is on air pleading for help, locating her. I mean, they just blew the city up with Hannah's face. And they're getting jack shit. She has seemingly disappeared into thin air. 9 days pass and investigators get their first huge break that actually changes this case completely. The police receive a phone tip of a man claiming to see Hannah inside of an Apple store located on 57th Street. Now, this wasn't just any old caller. This was someone who attended graduate school with Hannah, and while not being a part of her inner circle per se, he had met her and he knew her. Therefore, police felt that if this guy says he saw her there, there's a pretty good chance that it was in fact her. So they head over to the Apple store. They collect the surveillance footage from the day in question and review it. Sure enough, they spot caller dude interacting with a woman who appears to be Hannah. According to him, he asked if she was in fact the Hannah that everyone was looking for, and this woman kind of just brushes him off and is like, whatever, dude, politely fuck off, please. However, this guy swears it's her, which is why he contacted police. Police are obviously intrigued, so they continue watching. The woman then uses one of the computers to access her Gmail, and it's Hannah's Gmail. The police are like, okay, what? The woman, now presumed to be Hannah, immediately logs out and leaves. This eventually reaches friends and family, and they're clearly confused as to why she'd deny who she is and essentially attempt to fall off the planet, while the whole city is looking for her. Does she not want to be found? Like, what kind of weird shit is going on here? Her mom saw the footage and instantly recognized her, but says she also instantly realized something was off. 2 days later, Hannah was spotted at a local Starbucks in town. Police were contacted, but by the time they had arrived, Hannah had left out the back door. Why not the front door? I don't know. That's pretty weird. Oddly enough, police found out that Hannah's gym membership at the New York Sports Club had been used at least 5 different locations 5 times. So they head to the nearest one to find out more. They interview the employee at the front desk, who states that the female believed to be Hannah walked in, gave her account number, and verified that she was Hannah by first name. She then proceeded to use the community showers to bathe. This also threw police officers off, thinking, why not use your home shower unless you don't want to be found? Now, despite these numerous sightings and the scouring of the city looking for her, Hannah could just not be located. The Times wrote, quote, "It was as if the city had simply opened wide and swallowed her whole." Which brings us up to the fateful September afternoon, almost 3 weeks after Hannah disappeared from her morning jog. This woman was fished out of the water and immediately rushed to the ER. She was suffering from hypothermia, extreme sunburns, and extensive dehydration. When doctors asked her what the fuck happened, initially all the woman could say was that her name was Hannah, and she rattled off her mother's phone number. Her mother, Babs, rushes down to the hospital. Babs takes one look at her daughter and legit says she looked like she had been pulled behind a boat for 3 weeks. Which honestly, I feel like that's the first thing that would come out of my mom's mouth as well. Not, are you okay? What happened? You look like you've been pulled behind a boat for 3 weeks. Anyway, Babs says the first thing Hannah said was, "Why am I wet?" Apparently, Hannah had literally zero idea that she had literally been missing for 3 weeks. She was apparently still under the impression it was like August 28th, which is absolutely terrifying if you think about it. Once she was evaluated and treated, police made their way down to ask her some questions and get some answers. Babs stood outside and overheard the questioning, stating that as much as Hannah wanted to give answers, she just didn't have any to give. The last thing she remembered was jogging through Riverside Park near home on August 28th. At some point, they transferred Hannah to a psychiatric unit ran by the same hospital. There, they performed numerous tests to try and explain what the fuck happened to her. No neurological conditions were found to be affecting her in such a way that she'd be having identity loss, therefore bringing them to the conclusion that this had to be psychological. Ultimately, doctors diagnosed Hannah with the controversial condition of dissociative fugue, aka the Jason Bourne syndrome. What it is believed to be is essentially a rare condition where someone loses the ability to recall anything pertaining to their personal identity, where they can occasionally take on a brand new one and possibly just attempt to start a completely new journey. Like literally, they'll take off and just be gone. It's typically triggered by a life-altering event, whether it's abuse of some sort, combat trauma, disaster trauma, or even an unbearable internal trauma. There has to be a trigger. What's Hannah's triggered? She never made it clear. The next step doctors took was hypnotizing. They hypnotized Hannah to see if she would be able to recall any traumatic event, and she wasn't able to really pick anything out, both past and present. Because of the media frenzy here covering her disappearance, a lot of people felt she was faking it. I can understand people's doubts 100%, but when you look at it as a whole, if this was a staged incident, what was she going to gain from it? Fame? Possibly. But she was on the verge of death when she was found in the water. The deckhands even said a few minutes later they would have been pulling out a corpse. So I'm kind of torn. There's logic to both sides. But anyway, the negative attention that this drew to Hannah left her feeling embarrassed and ashamed and wanting to change her name and just leave all of this behind. But she couldn't make the decision to run away from who she was. Dissociative fugue was something she may have suffered from, but to Hannah, she didn't want it to define her. Many psychiatrists who have actually studied dissociative fugue say that people in the medical field and even in general largely discredit this as being an actual condition due to its rarity and lack of conventional diagnosis. Dissociative fugue is an extremely rare occurrence. However, dissociation in general is not. It is widely supported and accepted. Dissociative fugue is just a branch of it, so why is it treated any different? Now, a little sidebar into dissociative fugue. The most famous documented case of it was in 1887. A preacher named Ansel Bourne, like Jason Bourne, I thought that was kind of funny, left his Rhode Island home one day. He traveled 240 miles to Norristown, Pennsylvania, and opened a shop selling cards and candy. He suddenly decided to identify himself as Albert Brown. Oddly enough, the same initials as Ansel Bourne. He came off as completely normal to all of the neighbors and surrounding people that knew him. 2 months later, he knocks on his landlord's door asking, "Where am I?" Philosopher/psychologist William James offers to hypnotize him in hopes of converging the two identities. It wasn't possible. They wouldn't merge. Ansel Bourne returns home to his wife and his life in Rhode Island, not remembering anything from his Pennsylvania card-selling life as Albert. After this case, the study of dissociative fugue fell off the planet for a while until about the 1980s, during which dissociative behaviors were widely being diagnosed, many people abusing the concept and fabricating stories of trauma for whatever reason, which has led it to the negative connotations it carries now, unfortunately. Now, a bit of interesting insight into what I think could have been a sign of a trigger for Hannah. So Hannah's childhood was jammed-packed with religion. Both of her parents were pastors. She grew up in a Japanese-American church base in Oregon. While both her parents are American, Babs taught in Japan for several years and was fluent in Japanese. However, at some point in her childhood, her parents' ideologies took two hard lefts on each other. Her father, David, went in a direction I'm personally not a fan of. It reads as a sort of extreme view to some. He referred to himself as a, quote, man of the one book, and was heavily against anything not directly in suit with, quote, biblical morality, and was a believer in the idea that, quote, there's no such human as a natural homosexual. Now, just to be clear, this is in no way a reflection of my stance or my personal beliefs. I respect everyone's right to their own ideologies, religions, and personal beliefs, so long as there's a mutual respect for one another and it's free-flowing. But anyway, so Babs, however, did not feel the same way at all, and when Hannah was about 15, her parents filed for divorce. Her father moved overseas and continued his version of the gospel to indigenous tribes in Fiji. I'm going to butcher these, I'm so sorry. Palau, Guam, Malta, India, Zimbabwe, Guyana, and then finally settling in the Philippines, where he lives now. Him and Babs are no longer on speaking terms. Spring of Hannah's sophomore year, she found herself dealing with a struggle between her religious beliefs and her sexuality. Hannah was deeply affected by the defrocking of a female pastor after she